I'm going to go into the bit of the design philosophy before I show you the game, just to help kind of explain it. And the real question this whole game is about is, what would it really be like to live as a mage in a medieval fantasy world? And that's the kind of thing that was really rolling around in my head and got me really interested. And I was like, what would that, how could I make that game? How could I play that game? And the answer was I had to make it. And so that is what Archmage Rises really comes from. And I hope by the end of this presentation, you can see a glimmer of what this would look like to really live as a mage in a medieval fantasy world. So the influences for this game come from Dragonlance, for those who are familiar with Dragonlance, and really the character arc of Rassilon Major coming out of the Dragonlance novels. If you're not familiar with that, I'll just say Dragonlance is a D&D, advanced D&D campaign setting. They wrote some novels from Wizards of the Coast, and though I really like those novels, and so I was like, wow, what would it be like in order to live in the world of Krynn and have to, the day-to-day kind of stuff, like what would it really be like to be there? Sid Meier's Pirates is a great example of a game that's about living the life, and it's not a very complex game, but it has a lot of depth to it through some very simple systems of some trade and some permanence and the ability to move around from different locations and encounter different governors and stuff. And so I basically ripped a whole lot of game ideas from Sid Meier and Pirates. I won't go into these other ones in much detail, but if any of you have played the Guild 2, if you played FTL, Skyrim, XCOM, there's a little bit of XCOM, Enemy Unknown in this. FTL, because I really like a game that plays fast. I got 2 kids and a third one on the way, and I don't have 40 hours to have a kind of a complete gaming experience. So I'm looking for something that I can enjoy in kind of 5 to 10 hours and get the complete experience. And that would be the exact opposite of Dwarf Fortress. But I'm a big fan of Dwarf Fortress and have pulled a lot of ideas and stuff from that. So a big important part of this game is what I call the degree of player freedom. It's like, how much different kind of stuff can you do in this world? And interesting stuff that matters. Not just like, you're in Final Fantasy and you can go and stay at the inn, or you can buy something in a cafe and it's like, woohoo, that doesn't mean anything. But real stuff that you can do. Now, the ultimate is tabletop role-playing, where you have a live GM right there and they're able to take your questions. So, for instance, he's like, okay, the orcs are running away, and one of the players says to the other players, I think I'd like to open a coffee shop. And the other players are like, yeah, that's a good idea, let's open a coffee shop. And the GM is like, man, you guys suck. Okay, fine. And they're like, hey, let's go to town, let's hire this person as a barmaid, and blah blah blah, and okay, we're going to spend all our gold, and we're going to buy these chairs and whatever. And so the whole gaming night goes in a totally different direction than GM thought. But really, that's a great example of the amount of player freedom that is available in tabletop role-playing. So when you look at something like Final Fantasy, there's actually very little that you can do within that game. You just you can grind a lot, you can follow the story along, but you can't decide who dies and who doesn't die. You can't kill the king. You can't not save the world and all that stuff. And so Skyrim is a really interesting game in that it gives you a lot of choices, factions that you can join and be against and stuff. And so my goal is to make something that pushes out the limits from what I see Skyrim as kind of starting, and push that out further and get as close as I can to tabletop role-playing experience. And you can see from the diagram, I don't expect to get there, but I'm trying to break new ground, and I hope that's what you see and enjoy. The next thing is I'm going to say I'm trying to build the UNWIKIABLE game. And I'm sure some of you, now that I say this, are going to say, oh yeah, I'll wiki this game. Okay, well, I welcome the challenge. The idea here is you can't go on the internet and look up, what do I do in this scenario? Or, I want to help this noble or that noble. What do I do? And I hope that the wiki page just says this: sorry, just play the game. You are your own person in your own world, and hopefully nobody can tell you what to do or what not to do as far as playing the game. And so you just need to play the game just from the information that's available in the game, and just kind of take it from there and go. And so one other aspect of this is I'm trying to make a game that myself, as a designer and programmer of it, that I can actually play too. And so what that means is I need to design the game in such a way that I don't know what you're supposed to do. Just read the prompts, make your best decision, the one that makes the most sense to you, and go from it. And so there's a lot of, I'll get into kind of system building and world building and random generation, all this stuff to make a game that I can play, even though I made it, and can't be wikied, and you can just go to the Wikipedia and it just like tells you like, oh, these are all the things you're supposed to do in order to be super powerful in the game. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm going to dive into what I have done so far. And I will get to the questions in a second, but I don't want to delay any further before showing you guys some actual gameplay. So what have I done so far? Like I said, I announced the game about a year ago through some Gamma Sutra articles that got fairly famous. And one thing I did was I had Baby Avery. So you people that place pre-orders, you're helping support Baby Avery and her college fund, and we appreciate that. So that actually took about 2 months of my time. And but the actual stuff that I've been working on is, this is a systems-based game. And so I have been building lots of disparate systems that ultimately need to all work together in order to make a fully featured game. And so what is an example of kind of a systems design game? I would say Sid Meier's Pirates is a game that's built on systems. XCOM is a game that's built on systems. So you have a little bit of base management. You have to keep the different countries happy. Then you have this randomized generator for the maps. There's a lot of different systems that are going on, and that creates a really beautiful whole. And so Archmage Rises is a systems-based game. So one thing I needed to do was to create my own story editing tool, and that's what I call Bard. And this is a branching story tool. And if you look at it closely, you'll say, wow, that looks a lot like Twine. And the answer is yes. I basically made my own version of Twine. Why did I make my own version? Because I needed something that I could put my own scripting and some extra data management and stuff within it. And then I can output into a file that Archmage Rises can then read. And so my goal with this tool is to create a huge catalog of stories, and maybe to allow you as players to use Bard in order to create a catalog of stories. And this is another huge maybe, and I want to be clear, this is a maybe, but maybe I can cloud host all these stories from all these people that have been created, and when you play any given game of Archmage Rises, it's going to pull from the cloud and grab some of those stories from the catalog and intersperse them throughout your game. So I don't know what stories you're going to get from the grand catalog of stories. I don't like the idea of me sitting down and having to write 1,000 stories. I really like the idea of me writing about 100 and everybody else writing another 900, and we all get to enjoy those stories within the game. The next thing about Bard that makes this really unique and different from any other kind of story editor that I've ever seen or am familiar with is that when you create a story and you create the varying branches, it's not just branches of just different text lines. When you create a story, you create what I call roles. And this is kind of like when a director is making a movie and he'll say, oh, we need a villain, we need a hero, we need a love interest for the hero, we need the friend sidekick or whatever. Like these are roles. And so as you write these stories, you define what roles go into the story. And then when you save the file and the file is loaded into the game, the GM AI of the game casts the roles, just like a casting director on a movie. So if you say, here's a female and she needs kind of a low-paying job, the game looks at that, looks for somebody already in the world, and assigns them to that role within this particular story. And so I think this is very powerful and ultimately achieves that goal that I had of, I have no idea, who the villain is in this particular story, or I have no idea who the person who has the key information or the key in order to open the chest, is. You have to look through the clues and find that kind of stuff out. And so that you can define in the tool a role as broad as female and a certain economic status, or as narrow as actually creating a character that you give them a name, you give them a place, the kind of place that they would live, and that character suddenly comes to life when that story is generated. So for instance, the Sheriff of Nottingham is a very specific kind of character, and you can give him the name Sheriff of Nottingham, and you can define all of his character traits and stuff, and then that'll go into the game world. So that is the branching story tool that I've been working on. Associated with that is creating my own scripting engine so that I can script these things as part of the story tool. and yeah, basically it removes some of the programming necessity off of me. And a lot of work has gone into world creation. And so I saw in the chat before we started that, you know, people talking about Dwarf Fortress. And yeah, Dwarf Fortress is a big inspiration. I really like the Civilization series of games. I've been playing them since the first one, and I think it was 92, 93. And world creation is what I've been spending most of my time on. And here's something kind of funny. The save game system isn't working, and so it hasn't been working for about 6 or 7 months. And because of that, every time I run the game, it generates an entirely new world. So the world creation is actually really fast and really well tested, because I've generated thousands and thousands and thousands of worlds. And still to this day, I still can't save a game. So every time I add a feature and I want to test it, I have to create another world and watch it go. And so the world creation to me is the most exciting part of the game, is because I view you as a player that you are entering into your own story, and your story takes place in your world, and you can do things within that world. And your world is going to be different from my world, and the things that worked in your world may not work in my world. So the world creation is real important. So how does that world get created? Well, there's the world, and then there's specific locations within that world. And those locations can have like sub-locations. So for instance, we have a town, and a town can have buildings within it, and that building might be a mage shop, an inn, a house, or something like that. And so different towns are going to have like different buildings within them, and those buildings are defined through code, and there's an unlimited number that I can create for those kinds of things. So just trying to give an idea that there's a structure to all this to really make a living, breathing world that really makes a lot of sense before you, the player, show up and are born into the world. And so once we've created all those locations, the world generation system can go in and start populating the world and say, okay, this is the person who owns the inn, this is the people that work at the inn, this is the family of the innkeeper, etc., etc. And so the whole game world is generated, the people are populated, and boom, you got yourself a world, and we can go and have fun in it. Thank you, everybody, for the time, and I look forward to talking to you again.